Well, we've got some pretty interesting reports surrounding James Gunn's Superman and who the villain might actually be. It turns out Gunn has been giving us hints for a pretty long time, and this rumor, although unconfirmed, seems very substantiated. Let's take a couple minutes to talk about what's going on, what villains are being rumored, and why it feels like, based on what we know, this is very likely to be true. Now before we do that though, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell for all the updates. We do daily Marvel and DC videos, and we want to be your place for all the superhero news, but we're going to bring it to you truthfully and transparently, so you are in the know. Well, ever since we found out James Gunn was going to reboot Superman and effectively the whole DC universe, well, there have been a ton of questions about where the franchises in general are going. Now, as far as the upcoming Superman movie, there still are a ton of questions, and one of the biggest questions has to be, who's going to be the main villain? Now, over time, we've heard a lot of rumors, and we already know Lex Luthor is part of the film, so the villainy aspect of the project is kind of semi-established, but now we started getting a series of rumor reports that appeared to double down on who the villain was. Now, this didn't come from James Gunn, and it still hasn't been debunked or confirmed, but the original report came from Daniel RPK. And like we always like to say, if it's not from an official source, we want to take it with a grain of salt. But there is some pretty interesting supporting evidence. Now, according to Daniel RPK, the main villain of the upcoming Superman movie will indeed be Ultraman, and will be a clone of the David Cornsweet Superman. Now, he's reporting that Cornsweet will actually play both characters, and this does seem to be substantiated by some of the rumors of how the world perceives Superman and him defending himself from potentially the rest of the world's heroes. Now, according to this report, this version won't be from Earth 3. It will be created by Lex Luthor, and that's where it gets a little interesting, but we'll dive into that in just a second. Now, as far as using Ultraman, I'm a little tentative on this one. I think James Gunn's got a good grasp on these characters, but I'm very unsure if this will actually be Ultraman or some kind of combination of Ultraman and Bizarro. Historically speaking, cloning Kryptonians doesn't always go very well, and even in the animated series, when Lex cloned Superman, although initially he seemed to have a version of Superman, it ultimately degraded into Bizarro, which has been a villain many people have been speculating on since day one. This is where it gets more interesting from James Gunn. Now, if you remember correctly, when he made the announcement that Nicholas Hoult would indeed be the new Lex Luthor, he dropped a couple of messages on social media. You're seeing that right now, but if you look at what he wrote on the side and you scroll down, well, he seemed to almost out and out confirm some sort of biological experiment. If you notice, there's a set of hands, some DNA, a microscope, and a beaker, definitely suggesting old Lex Luthor is up to something, and more than likely, he will be cloning Superman. Now, if I'm making any guesses, and I know James Gunn, we're going to see this character evolve. He'll probably come onto the scene and basically be Superman's clone, or a version of Ultraman, but throughout the film, we'll probably see him degrade into Bizarro. James Gunn is well aware of the multiverse possibilities of Ultraman, so I don't think he's just going to simply waste the character in name like this for the first film. But he has always said his Kryptonian heritage is going to play big into this movie, and if Lex is actually, well, polluting that heritage, that indeed would make a pretty interesting story and put Superman up against a foe that is a true threat, and one that basically the rest of the world's superheroes would have a really tough time taking down. One thing Bizarro could bring to a film like this is being a very sympathetic villain. If you know the character in the comics and in various animated forms, he's basically very sad. He knows he's a clone, he kind of knows he's broken, but his intellectual capabilities are so reduced, he's unable to kind of process and compensate for any of these problems. It makes him the kind of villain that Superman just isn't out to destroy, but try to help. And I think this will definitely pull on the heartstrings of fans and be something we're not expecting. Hopefully we get some kind of confirmation or denial from James Gunn pretty soon. I don't think he'll be the only villain, but it sounds like at this point this is near a lock, and it should be pretty exciting and make for some incredible action sequences. But we'll have to wait and see.